DW Africa Link.
In a move meant to stabilize South Africa's political landscape, the recent government of national unity between the ANC and DA promised a fresh start. But as cracks begin to show, we are left with a burning question. Is this GNU under threat? Are competing priorities and fragile alliances paving the way for collapse? Let's dive into what's at stake and what it means for South Africa's future. Stay tuned. My name is Josie Mahachi. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter from Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The future of South Africa's Government of National Unity, GNU, hangs on the thread after President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the expropriation bill into law. The law allows the government to expropriate land if it deems it to be in the public interest. In certain circumstances, it allows expropriation without compensation. Now, the Democratic Alliance, which is the DA party, is the second largest in the unity government, has rejected the law, threatening not to support the coming budget vote if it's not reversed. It is also preparing to go to court. Now, the party accuses President Cyril Ramaphosa of implementing ANC policies in the GNU. The Inkatha Freedom Party, which is the third largest in the GNU, has also expressed reservations, while another GNU partner, Freedom Front Plus, has called on other political parties to join it in taking Ramaphosa to the Constitutional Court over the law. Now, joining me for this discussion to just find out some answers whether the GNU is collapsing or nothing is happening is political analyst in South Africa, Sandile Swana, and also our DW correspondent in Johannesburg, Thuso Khumalo. I'll start with you, Thuso Khumalo. You are a reporter on ground. If you can just start by telling us or giving us the latest tension and threat to the Government of National Unity.
The latest tension really is bickering over the expropriation law, which President Cyril Ramaphosa not long ago just signed into law. The law, in short, it empowers the government to expropriate property, including land. And land is key in the disputes that are happening with or without compensation. It wants the expropriation without compensation phrase, which is key in the disputes, to be taken out of this because they are saying it breaches the property rights laws and it could scare investors as well. But it's not only the Democratic Alliance. Another GNU member, the Freedom Front Plus, is also mobilizing other parties to drag Ramaphosa to court, to the Constitutional Court over this law again. But adding to that mix again, the other commotion is coming from the Public Works Minister, who is a DA member, Dean McPherson. He has said it on record that because him and his party believe that this law violates the Constitution by infringing on property rights, by also scaring investors away, he's not going to implement it. He's the minister responsible for that. And now you have Deputy President Paul Mashatile coming in to say you have to implement the law or you get booted out. So there is this commotion that's happening, and the DA wants Ramaphosa now to sit down with it and rectify the law, failure of which, of course, it's threatening to boycott things like the budget vote. And of course, that could also lead to the GNU collapse. And another scenario is that if Dean McPherson, who is the implementing minister, a DA member, refuses to implement the law, we could find Ramaphosa firing him. And what could that mean? DA could pull out at that end. So this is the commotion and the tensions that has risen over this expropriation law.
Right. Now, Sandile, you are a political analyst. What is happening exactly? What is the problem? Are you really surprised by everything that is happening now between the DA, the ANC, and also even the Inkatha Freedom Party?
I am not surprised, but I must confess that I'm severely disappointed by the conduct of the Democratic Alliance, as well as those that support the Democratic Alliance, and there are reasons for this. Before 1990, there were more than 51 laws depriving the black majority, which is the Coloureds, the Indians, and the Africans, the native Africans, of land and livestock, to the point that the Native Land Act of 1913, which is one of the more than 51 laws, prohibited anybody who is not an African, for instance, from selling land or renting land or doing any transaction related to land. So what is important now is that in 1991, the apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk, passed a separate law abolishing all the laws that discriminated against the black majority relative to land. So, which means the process of land redistribution and land reform was actually started by the white minority government in South Africa. And the principles of that between 1991 and today have become clear and are now encapsulated in this law that Ramaphosa has actually signed. So, which means it's more than 30 years that this particular process has been in progress within the state and within government. And all these people who are saying they are objecting today, they've been part of that process. That is what is disappointing. And that deprivation has to be corrected now. There is no part in the law that is contradictory to the Constitution as it exists today, or the intentions from 1991 of the government until today. So this is grandstanding by the DA. There is no real chance. I mean, I'm getting ahead of that. The law will be scrapped by the Constitutional Court, because if there is one clause or one paragraph that does not agree with the Constitution, of which I have not been able to detect any, it's only that specific clause that will be suspended and asked Parliament to correct it and then enforce it again.
Right. Now that you've mentioned clauses and maybe paragraphs that are not clear, for someone who, like me, who's not in South Africa or who's not South African, can you just give us more details of this expropriation bill? What does it entail, Sandile?
Every nation has got an expropriation act. For instance, if you want to create a road, you must get land from somewhere. And usually the road passes through somebody's plot or somebody's farm. And you have to have the right as the state to expropriate. So that is not what is under discussion here, which is expropriation for public use. What is under discussion is the reversal of the process where 80% of the population was removed from the land, given 13% of the land. So the white minority has had the majority of the land with a declining population, and the black population with an increasing population with a limited percentage of the land. So this act says, which is the contentious part, it's clear that you have to actually take land from the whites and allocate that land on a certain basis to the blacks. Then the second consideration is that there are clear listed rules how the value of the land will be considered, and a certificate will be issued by a court. So it's not that a certain government official can arbitrarily say, I'm taking your land, I'll pay you $1, and it ends there. No, the value can be certified by a court of law. And at all times, it must be consistent with the Constitution, consistent with other laws, and consistent also with this law. That is why I'm saying our expropriation law relative to private citizens. I'm also a property owner in South Africa, so I can be expropriated. But if I'm expropriated on the basis of this law, I have nothing to complain about, because all the money I've invested in my property will be paid back to me. But the money that has been invested by the state on my property will not be paid back to me.
Right, right. Now, Thuso, just for people like us to understand, should this, in this day and age, be an issue of land to the blacks, land from the whites? South Africans are South Africans, right? Just give us a clear understanding of why in this is 2025, we're still differentiating between white and blacks in South Africa, when a South African is a South African.
I think generally this that we should scrutinize if those parties that fought for the liberation of Africans have really done enough, because you'll find that in the context of South Africa and most of the countries in Southern Africa, if I can say, the war of liberation and fighting for land were head on head, top to top, as our guests have said there, that it was this desire to correct what the colonialism did. But 40 years down the line, 30 years down the line, you find these governments have not done anything as far as that land is concerned. So if you ask me, should we be talking about it now? Yes, in the South African context, because that issue has not been addressed. It is really unfair for the majority of people in a country. You find that the minority owns more of the land. 80% of the land is owned by the minority. It is upon this government to address that. Unfortunately, these liberation parties, they leave that until it's too late. When the political grounds get too hot for them, they tend to move towards this direction to try and appease the voters and all those things. And this is where chaos happened. But if they'd done it like Mr. Swana said, over these 30 years, doing it properly and in line, maybe the results could have not been this. But we're doing this now that there's a unit government, now that there's contestation of power, and things are likely to go wrong. So it is because of the neglect by these liberation parties that we find ourselves 30 or 40 years after liberation, talking about things that should have been done in the first years of the liberation.
Why do you think this bill or now law ignites so much worry for parties like the DA?
Historically, you'll see that the majority of members of the DA are those, the former whites, Afrikaners who benefited from this land that was looted or taken or stolen, depending on how you express it, from the black majority. So they've got a constituency that says you cannot allow this land to be taken away from us. Now they want a market value for that land, despite that the argument is that they got the land illegally because it was forcibly taken from the black people. So the DA and the Freedom Front Plus, they've got a constituency, people that voted for them, people that are saying, we voted for you so that you protect our rights. So they come in with laws like the property rights, don't allow that to happen. Investors will run away. And of course, in that atmosphere, you've got also the president saying, we're not going to do it illegally. We're going to follow the Section 25 of the Constitution that allows us to do that, but we'll do it fairly. Those that need to be compensated. Those that refuse that process could find themselves getting their land dispossessed without any compensation. So these arguments are coming in because you still have people who want to cling to that particular land that was taken in an environment that was not paid for, but now they need to be paid for. This is where the bone of contention is coming in.
Right. Now back to you, Sandile. From my understanding, it appears the members of the unity government are not threatening to pull out, but rather challenging the law in court. You touched on that a little bit earlier. But does it look like these are the only options available to them?
Yes, it is actually. Going to court is the only option left, because when the two houses of parliament have duly passed a bill, the president is not allowed by law to indefinitely postpone the signing of that law or to even change it. He cannot sit in his office and change it. So he has got to sign it unless he can properly show that there is a conflict between the Constitution and the law. And usually you will discover that the state law advisor and others have checked that the law is actually consistent with the Constitution. So they have no other choice other than to go to court. There's no meeting they can have. Now, the DA and all their supporters, by the way, if they say this bill must be taken to Parliament and be amended in Parliament, the vote in Parliament will go against them. They will not win.
Why?
If they call for a vote in the GNU, they will not win. Even in the GNU, in cabinet, they cannot win a vote there because they don't have enough numbers to win in the cabinet. So there is no place where they can win in terms politically. So the only option left for them is to go to court.
I know you said that you read this bill and you didn't see any paragraph or any clause that you think it shouldn't have passed or it shouldn't have been made a law. But maybe there's a fine print you might have missed, Sandile. Do you think there might be any elements you think shouldn't have been passed and signed into law, or you think it was just a pass?
First of all, I think I looked at it from the perspective of the Constitution, right? To say, have they looked at this part of the Constitution? Bear in mind that for us South Africans, people like myself who are in the political commentary space, we read this thing every now and then. So you look at the general direction, general spirit of this thing. Now, there is a little passage there. If you say this law on its own is trying to reverse the effect of 51 other laws, there is definitely a chance that on the side of the black people, it may not be fair enough. That chance, I've already granted that. On the side of the white people, it could be maybe somewhere giving them an unfair favor that they got through apartheid. Now, just to add to what Thuso Khumalo is saying, there are those white people who have very large properties that they got through dubious means, and that needs to be established. There are those that benefited from many government schemes of investment into their properties, which were abolished in 1994. So there are financial schemes that were actually abolished in 1994 that were available to white landowners. Then the democratic government abolished them. That those schemes are no longer available to white landowners and black farmers and black landowners. So, and also not available to whites. So if there's maybe 10 million rand that was put in your property by the state, or 50 million that was put, you cannot be paid for that. Let's be clear about that. And these people who are objecting to this want to protect those privileges that they obtained from the government, whilst other South Africans did not have access to that. Right. So, in conclusion of that issue, anybody, whether they are black or white, for instance, there are black parties that support this law, and they are preparing memorandum to the cabinet to say, let's propose further amendments to cover certain gaps, like the Al Jama party, to cover certain gaps that affect farm dwellers and people like that, black farm dwellers who are facing eviction from white farmers. All those things happen in the normal course of business, because when you've promulgated a law, you keep improving it. You cannot anticipate every scenario. And our courts in South Africa are organs that, through case law, create law. So if there are gaps in the law, some of it will be covered by case law. So there is no crisis at all, let alone a crisis that can threaten investors. There is absolutely no crisis, and there is no collapse of any GNU that's going to happen out of this.
I know that Sandile has said this is not a crisis too, so I don't know what we should call it, but does it look like there could be any upcoming moves to resolve this issue?
DA, regardless of whether chances of that happening or not, is it has declared a dispute, and according to their agreement in the GNU, there's section 19 that says once one party declares that disagreement, then they should sit and try and resolve it. But rightly so, said by our guest there, the chances of that happening are very slim, because Ramaphosa, what he has done, he has just signed what Parliament has already approved. And the chances of them winning another political argument is almost not there. Let me just give you just a paragraph of what the ANC has said in his statement and the president has said, for you to see that chances of negotiating are very slim. The ANC in its statement, I quote, it says, "This momentous achievement reinforces the ANC's dedication to addressing the persistent legacy of colonial dispossession and apartheid spatial planning, ensuring that the land and resources of South Africa are used to benefit the majority of its people. The ANC views this law as a progressive and transformation tool to advance land reform in ways that enable inclusive economic growth and social cohesion." So I don't see politically ANC changing that start. But what does the president say in defense of this? He says in the statement that was released by the president, in terms of this law, an expropriation authority may not expropriate property unfairly for a purpose other than a public purpose or in the public interest. Expropriation may not be exercised unless the expropriating authority has without success attempted to reach an agreement with the owner or holder of a right in property for the acquisition, therefore, on reasonable terms. An expropriation authority is therefore obliged to enter into a negotiation with the owner of a property required for such purposes. Close quote. So if you look at these two statements, I don't see politically Ramaphosa or Parliament in the form of the ANC in Parliament moving away from these positions, because they justify what already has been done. So hence, the only door that's open is for the DA to go to court, but whether the case there, they will win it or not, only time will tell.
Right. Maybe before we wait for that time, since we have a political analyst here, he might be our our prophet for the day. Sandile, do you think a resolution can be found in the court as the DA threatens to sue the president? Just your opinion as we wrap up our discussion.
Yes. So, as you can imagine, because of the net effect of the previous more than 51 laws that were depriving Black people of a place to live, to work, land, and so on, there already, since 1994, have been many court cases that have demanded this type of corrective measure, such as this act. So when you then write this act, you then also already read what the Constitutional Court said in previous cases, so that at least on those grounds where the government had been found to have failed, the court will not find you failing again. So at the most, the DA can win one paragraph or the other, not the whole act. This act is now permanent. It's going to be permanent in law. So even then, if they win a paragraph, it can be an elaboration of that paragraph, a better definition of that paragraph, not suspension of the paragraph or anything. And it's in their job to do it. The minister is a DA minister who's supposed to write the detailed regulations that will govern how this law is enforced. So I don't see them winning anything substantial. And the threats that they are issuing about investors, issuing threats about the GNU, they are empty threats, completely empty threats, because the major economists in our country, agricultural economists, and the stock exchange and elsewhere are happy with this. They are comfortable with it. There's no investment collapse that's going to happen.
Sandile Swana, a political analyst based in South Africa, and our very own DW correspondent in Johannesburg, South Africa, Thuso Khumalo, many thanks for joining us.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
At the Africa Link podcast, we always look across the continent to see how the stories and issues we are dealing with play out or at times even overlap. Now let's hear from what South Africans think of these ongoing tensions within the GNU over this law. Does it worry them in any way, or it doesn't worry them?
You didn't consult other people. That's why I said we give this one 3-4 years. Even if Malema said so. This one is not going to last. They will always fight and fight. You don't know what's going to end. This government is going to fall, this one. Let's wait for the next vote.
I would say it is very impossible for different parties to come together and say we agree in this one forever. We have been waiting for this, that one way or the other, they will fight. In this case of signing, Ramaphosa was very wrong. Of course, he was supposed to consult the other parties. I think communicating is the best key in doing everything. They're supposed to communicate in everything, agree with each other. And now when Steenhuisen is saying they are going to pull out, they are also wrong. They must communicate and be in one accord.
If they were to focus on service delivery, I think it would be better with the government of national unity if they were to serve the interest of all those that they need to be serving, which is me and you on the ground. But it looks like there's more fights than service delivery, because I think one is looking for their own interest. I think that's my feeling, because they should be sitting on the table and say, this is the change that the majority of people are looking for.
That's it for this edition of Africa Link. Remember, you are not just a listener, but a part of our community, and your engagement can shape the direction of our discussions. We value your insights and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. Remember to follow so you can catch all of the Africa Link podcast episodes. This podcast was co-produced and edited by Isaac Kalechi. My name is Josie Mahachi. Thanks for listening. Until the next one, it's bye for now.